Hello and welcome to Anything Goes. I can tell I'm tired. I can't remember where I'm at. Hope everyone's doing all right. Thanks for showing up tonight. With me as always, my co-host Jason. How are you, Jason?
Oh, so far so good. Just
Yeah.
getting ready to draw. I'm actually helping my daughter with a school project,
Right.
so hence the gold-laden poster
Oh,
board.
I've got my volume on.
Uh-oh.
I know. Oh, sorry about that. So you're helping your daughter
Yeah. Oh, and
do
she's doing a report on Colombia, actually, where my
all
wife
right.
is from. So
Oh,
needing
interesting.
some help with drawing a couple things.
Cool. Well, before the show, we were talking about swearing, weren't we?
We were.
How we use about what is a swear word, what do we class as offensive and real swear words, and how how important are words, and do we use them too loosely, or do we mean what we say? And I think a lot of the time we don't mean what we say, but we're just in the habit of using these terms that we use because we have the swear jar, which I haven't brought out for a while now, and I wish I had, because the last 2 or 3 guests have.
Yeah, they've been rather. They've been working blue.
They would have filled that up a few times over, so I missed out. So we're not going to use it tonight because we might step over into that.
We might step into the realm of the obscene.
Yeah,
But but we will be stepping there clinically. This is for science, people.
Absolutely. We're not going to use the obvious swear words, which, we don't need to say. Hopefully people know what I mean. Yeah, who knows what people's standards are,
Right.
where we stop, draw the line.
Oh, absolutely. Well, let's just keep it within the confines of Western civilization, English-speaking civilization, because every culture has its own oddities about what's a taboo, what isn't, right? So, Susan Robertson, I was about to bring up George Carlin's 7 words you can't say on television, but I'm like, how many people would actually get that reference? Unfortunately, that's, some of the younger viewers may not get that one.
Well, why don't we start? Why don't we start with some words, throw them out there? And this one I don't think is a bad one.
Well, maybe actually we should start off with, is there a difference between, say, a swear word and words that are impolite? Because I think that's sort of a bigger question, right? Like, what is impolite, and what makes it impolite? Then is there a difference between impolite and offensive, right? Why does it exist? I think that's, like, before we even started addressing why certain words went that way, is what is that desire? Why does that even exist as a concept? That there are words that we say, and I guess so. I guess the question is, is all swearing offensive language, or are there degrees of offensiveness and social acceptability, and why? And I think that there are levels, right? Like, there's things you say when you're really upset, then there's things you say when you really want to hurt somebody, and so I think a lot of this comes down to, let's start with the idea of manners, right? Like, every culture has a way of saying, hey, these are the behaviors that what we would consider manners, are ways of expressing respect for the other person, right? I think that's really what comes down to. It's a way of showing respect to the person is to use appropriate manners. And the idea of there being offensive language was a way of saying, hey, this is you're being unmannerly towards them, for either because you're trying to be provocative or you're responding to something that's provocative. It was a way of allowing language to shift the tone of the encounter. At least that's my understanding. And the reason you have this sort of ever increasing level of offensiveness is to sort of help determine where you are on that sliding scale of, we're being mannerly and respectful, to, I'm going to beat your brains in with a pool cue, right? And you got and those words sort of help you determine where you are on that gauge. At least that's my interpretation. What are your thoughts?
Well, there's it's about I think it's, you know, we were saying before, it's about frustration, isn't it? It's about how we are, basically, how we deal with situations. And, you know, if you're calm, you're not going to come out with those words, because you can be, you know, angry and frustrated without insulting someone, or you can be provocative, like you say, and swear and insult at the same time. So you know, it's definitely, you know, it's determined that you want to do that. But when you said something like, you know, you're gonna put, you know, bash him in the head with a pool cue, but there's also those off the cuff kind of remarks of, you know, Dave's home late for dinner, and you could strangle him. You know, and we use those really loosely, and people don't, you know, don't even blink twice when someone says something like that about the husband who was late home. I could have strangled him, but if you'd have said I could have effing strangled him, they might have been a bit more offended that you used the F word rather than strangle him.
Well, I think the thing is, it also may have been, it's also more of a, well, that may be a more serious tone, because it goes to the concept of an idiom, right? An idiom or phrases. It's not just an individual word, but it's a sentence or a phrase that carries a meaning. And everyone sort of accepts within a given culture that idiom means something. Like you said, I could strangle him. That's an accepted idiom. And we understand it's a way of expressing frustration, but not intent, right? But once you modify an idiom, that idiom starts becoming very different, right? Like if you leave a part out, or you add something to it. For example, a really I may be giving a little too much away being a Texan here. But in Texan slang, if you tell someone bless your heart, you've literally just said, you dumb, because it's oh, bless his heart. It's the thing is, a lot of people are like, oh, that's so sweet. Of course, if you're Texan, you're like, wow, that just got serious real quick. You know, but it's an accepted idiom as a way of expressing another thought. But once you start modifying those idioms, though, then the context changes. So it's not necessarily that the F word itself is what it becomes offensive. It's you've changed the idiom. You're saying you which means you've almost taken it out of that metaphor stance, and it's becoming more real, which goes back to maybe the broader question that you asked. Are we using our language too loosely? Do words carry meaning, both for the sender and to the receiver? Can we say something in jest? Can we use an idiom in its appropriate manner and cause damage that maybe we can't see, either psychically or supernaturally? I think that's sort of really the heart of the question, isn't it? You know, do these words carry broader context?
I'm thinking back to when I was a kid, and I don't know if you know this rhyme, and it's sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And when you think about that now, how words can absolutely destroy people. If you're insecure or whatever, vulnerable, actually words can hurt you more than a stick and a stone. And
absolutely.
It seems such a strange thing to, you know, to be a rhyme to tell kids, because it was told to me. I think, you know, all kids knew that kind of thing to kind of toughen you up. You know, don't worry, you can take the insult, you can take the, you know, the whatever, as long as you're not getting, you know, beat with a stick and a stone. But actually, it doesn't really make sense.
Well, okay, so this is where I'm gonna actually differ from you on this. I think the reason the rhyme exists, because I heard it growing up as well, is because it's learned. You have to learn that it doesn't have power. I don't want to get too far off on it because it's a subject with far too many facets to really explore, but sort of the concept of magic not having power over you if you don't believe in it, right? I don't necessarily ascribe to that per se, but to a point, I think it does. It does work to a degree, and I think in this context, we'll just keep it here, right? It works very, very well, which is the power of someone's words. Because we are, even let's take the supernatural and put it to the side for a moment. We are pack animals. We want to be accepted and loved by everyone. So the idea that someone is saying something that's negative towards me can be very, very harmful. But the point of that limerick is to remind us, hold on, Those words only have power over you if you allow them to have power over you. And I would think that may be one of the big problems that our culture has, is that we have, I mean, you'll hear this phrase all the time: words are violence. And I'm over here like, no, violence is violence. Words are words. Those are two very different things. Now, to a degree, I understand what they're saying. You can cause someone a lot of harm with words, which is why we need to be more careful with it. I think that's sort of the conversation that we're having.
Well,
but at the same time, it can't. I can't insult you and have it really rock you to the core unless you allow it to rock you to your core.
But if you say you grew up in as a in an abusive childhood where you were emotionally being abused, and just simple words growing up and conditioned, that's not going to have much of an effect, is it, when at that age, to understand that
Correct.
actually it's a projection and it's not you, it's them.
It's them. Yeah.
But that's I'm thinking more for when you're a child. You're not old enough to understand, and if you haven't got that support around you, words I think can really damage you.
Absolutely. No, they absolutely can, which is why I think that's why that limerick, I think, exists. But it has to exist. For it to have power, it has to exist within a context where it's even taught to you from people who care, right? I think this goes back to the idea. So again, we have the supernatural off the table for just a second. But words, because they convey meaning, and meaning then the worldview of the person who's telling them. If this is someone who matters to you, right, then yeah, those words shape the way you view yourself, right? Particularly if you're young, right? Let's keep it in the context of a child who's growing up in a verbally abusive home. That will determine, in many ways, much the direction that they go as their personality is shaped and formed. Heck, we don't really have, I mean, there's some studies on it, nothing that really tells us what's happening here. But we know that even talking to plants will change their productivity, right? Again, there's still a lot of argument as to what the degree and why and blah, 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 blah. But the fact of the matter is it still works. We just don't understand why. But if it works for a plant, why wouldn't it work for a human being? And you have a child that you're growing, and if they hear nothing but negativity, if they hear nothing but even if they're meant to ingest words that tear them down, then that is going to completely alter their perspective on themselves. And then that in turn shapes how they view the rest of the world.
Oh, yeah. And it's just passed down, isn't it? Because you tend to, unless you kind of see the light at some point, and I hope everybody does, whoever's gone through anything, you realise that isn't the way you have to break that cycle, because otherwise it just continues and continues. And going back to, how we use words, it's down to the person, isn't it? And the way you deal with situations. But on a lighter note, because this is getting quite deep.
Yeah. Well, it's like this pole vault out of this one. Continue, please.
Yeah. Next. The simple words that I would use that maybe would offend people in a or certain maybe religious, I don't know, but if I use the term damn or hell, over here it's just it's just a word. It doesn't mean, when I say, oh damn, I'm not trying to insinuate anything other than I've stubbed my toe or something. And it's probably the first word I can think of. Well, probably think of more, but we're not going to use those words. But over there where you are, they're not words really that those words could upset people, couldn't they?
Yeah. So a lot of it, again, depends on context. Like I will maintain my sinless visage that I have here. For those who watch the Bible study. No, but it's like, that's kind of like PG language. Like, it's not polite to use around a kid, kind of a thing. And you really wouldn't necessarily want to make a habit out of it. Again, it's the idea of politeness and manners being a form of respect for the other person. But yeah, I mean, that's when things get, it's they're not considered overly offensive. No one's gonna, be like, oh, over it, but it's one of those things where it is about, I think it goes back to the idea of respect and manners being sort of a level, right? And so the thing is, one of the things I've really started to think about last year or so is the idea that that just cost us $5. Is this idea that in philosophy and logic, you have fallacies, right? And one of the big ones is the slippery slope fallacy. It's considered a fallacy. You're not supposed to be able to use it. And I'm sorry, but the more I look around, the more I'm like, nope. The biggest fallacy in the world was saying that the slippery slope is a fallacy. The slippery slope is absolutely a thing. And let's look around. Can you argue that it's not? Right? There is a point where it's like you have to, and this actually comes out of Buddhism, but it's a phrase I love. It's talking about human behavior and likening it to a guitar string, right? I think it was technically a lute or whatever that the Buddha was talking about, but it was basically a guitar string. It says if you tune it too tightly, it will break and snap. But if it's too light, it will not play. There needs to be tension in our lives. There needs to be discipline in our lives. These things have to exist. There does need to be some form of manners a standard that we're held to, because if you don't hold yourself to the standard, then what happens is you do start creeping downward, right? And the problem is wherever the high water line is, and then wherever the baseline is, the problem is as those start creeping down, then the bottom starts getting further and further down, right? I had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine who had spent a lot of time in Japan, and this seems completely unconnected, but give me a second. He was talking about how, Americans, we tend to think that their porn is really weird. He's like, but, and it is. He's like, but hold on a second. He's like, there's a level of stuff that is completely unacceptable that is acceptable here, and you don't. And he pointed out that he believed that they didn't have the same problem with pedophilia and some of these other issues because they had such a high watermark. For it's like, okay, this stuff up here is acceptable, but it's like anything out here has some sort of backlash. It actually prevented people. So if people are going to fall down below the mean at any point, the higher that mean line is, or the manners line is, the farther up they stay, right? It sort of keeps them. So the problem is, as our level of acceptability collapses, someone who's, say, going to be 10 deviated standards away, as this drops, so do they. And it comes to then they're going to fall into far more worse behavior than they would if there was a higher standard. So the idea, going back to language, of designating which words are polite and impolite comes back to trying to create a standard that allows everyone to say, okay, this is respectable. And it sort of prevents, I ultimately think, violence from occurring. Because if you don't allow yourself to get heated in tone, in voice, and in language, then you're not going to get into fisticuffs, right? Oh. Fisticuffs, like it's 1815, we're going to do, the British boxing thing. My point is, I think these words do carry power, and I think that this idea of there being polite language and impolite language is far more important, not necessarily because of any supernatural or psychic thing, although I do think those absolutely are factors, particularly with like the children. But as a societal level, the higher we elevate behavior and say this is what's acceptable, the less likely we are to get even worse behavior from those who will not meet that standard.
Oh. I think it's a case, isn't it, of it's not what you say, but how you say it. Mm-hmm. And you can definitely get your point across in a much politer way, and still with a little, tease of sarcasm, if you like, if you can get away with it. But it's kind of, it's just habit, isn't it? It's inbred in us, I don't know, somehow, not everybody, but to react. Mm. And it's that reaction, isn't it? So, I don't know.
There's always been fighting words. I mean, show me a story written in any period, in any culture, where someone doesn't say something and it's like, well, that's when the swords got pulled out, right? There's always been fighting words. It's just each culture defines them. Now, I think a really excellent question is going back, really kind of in the heart of your question, which is why this word versus this word goes back to why did we choose this word to be offensive and this word not? Like, why? Because it does seem sort of arbitrary at first glance. I would argue, at least at the root of many of these aspects of what's high manners, what's low manners, what's ill mannered, comes down to the difference when English was being formed from the French Latin aristocrats and the Germanic speaking lowborns, right? So the stuff that's more Anglo-Saxon is more Germanically derived. Those words tend to be the ones that you don't use, right? Whereas the stuff that's more derived from the French Latin seems to be that's the acceptable language. So it's the heritage, from really 1,000 years ago of aristocrats, of these highborn aristocrats versus the commoner, and the idea that the commoner the language starts off as just the language of the common people, or the vulgar, meaning the most popular language. Even think about the word vulgar, right? We say vulgar as if it's bad. It has a bad, but it comes literally from Latin, which just means the common tongue, right? It's the word of the common man. So inbred in our language structure is this idea that the language of the aristocrats is sort of the high watermark, and the language of the common man is what's offensive. So where does that take us? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm thinking, the aristocrats, whatever, they probably swear, don't they? I think, we're all, it's display, isn't it? When they're on display, I imagine, I'm not, accusing any aristocrat of anything other than, just my opinion, but I imagine the Queen swears. I'm going to say that. I'm pretty certain we all do it. We all do it. I know people say they don't, and maybe you don't, and it is just when you're out, you have to be polite, and pretty sure they do if they're on display. It's just I don't know. You can meet a common person, and they could be the most politest. Who are common people? We're all the common people, aren't we? If you're not in royalty, if you've not got money, we're all the common people, and there's plenty around that are polite. And I think it's just when you stub your toe, you're not thinking about anything other than the first word that comes into your head. I'm pretty sure if
that's usually when I'm blessing my own heart at that point. But so there's an interesting concept here, right? That's not necessarily obvious into what you're saying, right? The idea of the aristocracy being, because of the language they use, the manners, being better people versus the commoner, and of course the obvious is that it's not necessarily about the manners you use, but how you treat people. But I think at the heart of is even the concept of high manners being how you're treating someone as an indication of your behavior. If we go back in time a few hundred years, the word gentleman had an actual meaning. It didn't mean someone who treated somebody well. It meant it was a person who owned land. It had an actual meaning that was useful, right? I think the problem is our culture, and I don't know why. I wish I could explain why, but we've melded so many concepts together that if you read throughout history, wasn't necessarily there, right? It's a very modern, within the last couple hundred years being modern, conception of nobility being better people. Their manners, their level of acceptability was due to their responsibility and their roles within society. And they did not say, they didn't say that their manners were necessarily because they were better people. They believed they were better people because they were, they had the divine right to rule. And we've had the conversation, goes back to the Nephilim, I believe. But the idea of the manners and the way they behaved and the niceties and all that was more about the understanding of the power that they wielded within that given society. I think this goes back to the idea of why are manners actually important? Because oftentimes we see manners as unnecessary, and it's that standard line, right? It's saying this is what manners are, and if someone's ill-mannered, it's because there could be something behind it. Are they trying to disrespect you? Well, that could have broader ramifications. Culturally speaking, if you're an aristocrat and you're responsible for hundreds of people or thousands of people or an entire nation. So I think there was sort of this idea that it's like, yeah, a commoner could get away with that kind of behavior because their behavior only affects them, whereas the behavior of the aristocrat affected far more people. But we at some point combined the idea that meant about human value or even whether or not they were a good person. And I would think that's the problem. We need to uncouple those two concepts, because you can be a very, very polite person and be as mannerly as possible and still be a complete and total jackknape. You know, I mean, it's like you can be a garbage trash person, but you can treat someone respectfully. And I think that is a concept we need to really sort of embrace and understand. It's like, hold on, manners is about you showing respect for the other person and trying to be civil in public. I think this idea that's like, well, I want to be, I was like, well, I want to be my honest, authentic self. All right, can I help you out here? Your honest, authentic self doesn't exist because your personality changes. The language you use changes. Everything changes about you depending on the culture that you're in or the people that you're with. If you're with people that you don't know, you're going to behave differently. When you're with your best person, right, the people you're like 100% with, you're like ride or die. You're going to be far more relaxed, and you're going to let things go, and you're talking about things. Great example. Me and my best friends, if we're together, we will call each other the worst things you've ever heard in your life. You'd be like, why are these people friends? But you have someone show up and say anything like that to one of them or to me, and it's on. It's like someone's going out in an ambulance. Why? Because we're tight, and it changes the context of the words. Going back to your point, it's the context that matters on a lot of this stuff, right? But the bigger point here is we are very malleable creatures. We don't, whole idea that,
we've had this conversation. We've kind of had this conversation a few weeks ago when I said, who are we? Actually, who are we? We're many things. Mm-hmm. And, we're a sponge from a baby. And so we're just taking on, we're just taking on everything that's around us. And when do we ever develop into ourselves? And do we have to move away from distraction to find that? I mean, how do you discover who you are? And then what? And then you're free to be who you are in any situation.
Okay, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say the reason so many people don't reach the point that you're describing is because of the language that we use. So this gets back to the idea of words having power. I don't believe you can discover who you are. I think you are what you choose to be. And that's, I think that so let's talk about the power of language here in this regard. The Worf-Sapir hypothesis basically states that the words we use, the meanings behind them, determine the way we even view reality, right? Concept of deep time. If you don't have the concept of deep time, then your view of time is completely different from someone who does have an idea of deep time. Your question of how do we discover who we are? Well, what if it's not about discovering who you are, but choosing to be a thing? You can never discover something that can't be discovered. If it's something you have to make. Like if you start off with a block of clay, you're like, well, how do I discover what this block of clay is supposed to be? The block of clay.
How do you develop yourself then? How do you develop? Yeah.
Right. That's my point. We have to change the language first. Because if we're looking for something that can't be found because we have to create it, well, you have to first change your language. It's who do I decide to be? Right? What do I decide this block of clay should be? Not what should this clay be, but what do I decide it to be? That very much changes the nature of the relationship between you and the clay, but it also changes the idea between myself and who I am. And if it's not, I'm trying to discover who I am, if it's something I get to choose to be, then one is passive, the other is proactive. And I think this is the thing that limits that. Okay, something, and again, it's taken me, I'll be 40 in like a month. Actually, less than a month now. Anyway, but it's taking me literally what?
You're still a spring chicken.
Yeah, huh? Yeah, tell that to my joints every morning. Unfortunately, I had a misspent youth in kickboxing, so
Right.
I crack a lot more than I should. But it's taken me this long to understand that there is a monumental difference between a victor and victim mentality. I'm gonna talk about some. No one knows yet. This is so I won't use any names. But I recently was trying to help somebody, and COVID had hit. I was trying to help him, gave him some cash, trying to help him get on his feet. But it was always, I need a little bit more. I need a little bit more. I need a little bit. And I'm like, hold up. All right. This is the last time I'm going to help you. I'm going to give you one lump sum, but this is it. I can't help you anymore. And it's like, I was trying to get him in contact with church. It's like, well, you're young enough. Why don't you go and join the military, and actually change your life, get out of the situation that you're in. Long story short, I had to block him. I had to just get rid of the kid because it's like, I'm sorry, you're choosing not to change. I can't care more about your life than you care about yours. His entire mentality. And this is, now again, I don't know that he was addicted to drugs or anything like that, but every drug addict I've ever known in my life and I've ever lost, no matter how much I cared or loved them, the mentality they had was always the same. It's the world is against me. I can't do anything. I need someone to help me get out of the situation. No matter how much help you give them, they will never escape that situation because they don't believe that they can, because they believe that they're passive in their own life. You have to make that decision to realize, no, I am the victor in my life. I get to choose who and what I am. The Danny, I think, has a great question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
how do we choose who we are when the brain is proven to make your decision before you do?
Well, I think there are aspects to that are true, but the problem is, again, this goes back to the idea of determinism, right? So we've completely spun off what the topic was initially, but I think there are personality traits that are sort of inborn, but not all of them. We have the free will to make certain choices and to say, this is what I like, this is what I not like. And a lot of it is just we retrain ourselves. One of the funniest things I ever learned was in college was how effective electroshock therapy is. Like, apparently there's insurance companies that love it, and they're like, please, can we get ahead to it? Because you're basically, again, we do it very, very differently from what people see in movies and stuff from like the 50s and 60s. It's very, very different. But the idea that you can retrain someone on how someone thinks is very real. I mean, that's the entire point of Pavlov's experiments, right? We can train someone to think very differently. The question, though, is, do you want to, right? Do you want to live a different life? Well, then you get to choose what life you want to live, right? Now, does it happen overnight? No, it takes years of conscious, and you have to be conscious of it. I think it goes back to the idea of language, right? If your language about who you are is passive, again, I'm going to discover myself or what. If it's passive, then you're going to come at it from a passive behavior or from a passive perspective. But if you're proactive, if you change your language and you make the decision to be the victor in your own life, it will take years. It will take time. Again, discipline, but you can do it, and you can change who you are into what you want to be. But you have to set a goal for yourself. You have to do it on a daily basis. But you can't sit there and say, well, I'm going to achieve a goal. It's a direction of your life that you have to sort of set your course to. And it's a very conscious thing. As humans, we tend to be very, okay, this goes back to even the idea of, there are some people who are born this way, right? Just from a kid, they're like, no one can tell me what to do. The world will bow before me, and they're gone, right? There is no stopping them from anything. Most of us, though, that's not inborn within us. We're sheep, right? We want to be led, and that's a natural state. We have to train ourselves to believe that we're wolves. We have to train ourselves to believe that we are powerful creatures, right? That's at least that's my thought on it. It's something we have to be. For most people, we have to be trained into it, but we can train ourselves into it.
Yeah, definitely. But it's just having that, going back to people on drugs, it's hard, isn't it, to, where do they start? Where do you start? If you've only got yourself, because that's a lot of it. Without support, it's very hard to pick yourself up, isn't it, and change. Turn your life around. I know it's not an overnight thing, obviously, but it must be so overwhelming to be in that situation.
Yes.
But yeah, and I know you make choices. People make choices, but there's just not enough support out there, is there? I think. Or is there? I don't know. Because why is the world in such a mess? Why are we at this stage still got people, taking drugs, committing crimes, going through horrendous childhoods or marriages or relationships, and we're in this continuous cycle of it being passed down from generation to generation of this is how life is for us, for you, for whoever, it just seems like, are we ever going to get out of this cycle?
Okay. Well,
Thank you again, Deanna. That's very generous of you. That's twice in 2 days.
Deanna, what did you say? What swear word did you use for the jar?
It wasn't a swear word.
It was the Q word. Wait, what? How bad was that? No. Okay, so you literally just please, can we recognize that you did not ask a simple question?
I didn't. I know. So, I'm not expecting you to get your wand out and
okay, so here's the thing. I have an answer for you. I just don't know if it's where you want to go, right?
Yeah.
Is there an end to this? Yes. It's honestly, I think to a point, I'm not even certain if it's necessarily when Jesus returns. I think it's even I think it's not even the millennial kingdom. I think it's after that. But I think a lot of that will be resolved then. But I think that the reason our world is as screwed up as it is twofold. One, it's the evil that lives within the heart of every human being, right? We call it sin. The simple fact of the matter is, while some people, coddle their sin and feed their sin and make it worse, others not so much. Some are born maybe with more evil in their hearts. Others different. I don't know. But the simple fact of the matter is, it existed within all of us. We, as a culture, have to agree that there's a need for discipline. There's a need for there to believe in the concept of evil. But the simple fact of the matter is, no matter how, there is no structure that can be set up that will cure human hearts, right? That's something every human has to do. The simple fact of the matter is, though, I don't know that humans are necessarily, I mean, if you take the Bible, seriously, and I do, if it says that there's, broad is the way to hell, right? People don't want to change. There's that deep inbound desire. The idea, ultimately one of the things to change who you are, to change from evil to good, requires a lot of humility, right? It's in fact one of the common things. I was talking to a friend today, because he's like, look at how crazy the world is. And we were talking about the movie Cuties that just came out. I don't know if you heard anything about that over you are, right? And the simple fact of the matter is, it's like, look, all throughout the Bible, you see these words as, woe unto those who call good evil and evil good. Well, I'm sorry, but if it existed 2,000 and literally 3,000 years ago with some of these comments, then it's always existed. This is just inborn within us, right? This idea that we're going, that the evil within us is drawing us to there. That's why we have to tell people, we have to train them to be nice. You have to train them to love someone else. I have never had to train one of my children to smack another kid in the side of the face because they got the toy truck, right? Anyone who believes that children are born naturally good has never had a child. I'm sorry. Now, there are children with different dispositions, absolutely, but every child is innately a savage, hedonistic monster that the only reason nothing terrible happens is because they're too small to inflict their will in the world, right? You have to train them to love their fellow man. It's like they'll happily play with the kid till the kid takes the wrong toy. Then it's like then it's on, right? It's like they're just going to smack each other around until they get, because that's who we are. It's that innate evil that's within all of us. We train them to do that. The problem is, I don't know that that's something that you breed out of humans. And the problem is, I think there's too many of us, if there's a solution outside of scrapping everything and starting over fresh, I don't know that I've got one for you outside of, I'm just going to tell you, maybe some people need Jesus, right? That's it. I'm sorry, you need Jesus, and I can't help you beyond that. And again, you have to want to change. There are lots of people who go to churches who are absolutely terrible human beings. I will say that up front because I've seen them. Being in a church doesn't change you. Calling yourself a Christian or anything doesn't change you. You have to want to change.
But we're all capable of doing anything.
Yeah.
All of us. You can be, like you say, it could be, a aristocrat, could be a member of parliament, you can be a member of royalty, you can still be a killer, a rapist, a psychopath, a narcissist. It doesn't matter, does it? It's complicated.
It is. It is complicated. Well, we want a 10-word answer. Okay, did you ever see The West Wing?
A little bit. Okay. Not
it's
enough.
Gotcha. It's one of my favorite shows of all time. There's an episode when he's running for re-election. They're talking about the perfect 10-word answer, right? It's a 10-word response to a problem that you can fit on a bumper sticker and it solves all your problems. And at the end of the episode, the climax is him saying, some situations don't take a 10-word answer will never work. This is one of the problem is, yes, there is a 10-word answer to this, which is you need Jesus. But as far as does it take, how does it actually work? Look, that's a lot of work. But do we have the power? I think the problem is we all have the power to be anything and everything that we choose to be. The problem is that it's far easier to choose evil. It's far easier to choose lascivious living. It's far easier to choose selfishness and greed. Okay, let's switch over to the dark, to Star Wars here. The dark side isn't more powerful; it's just easier, right? Being evil does not require a lot of work. It does not require a lot of training because it's inborn within us. Being good, that's hard. There's a quote from.
So we're born evil then.
Yeah. Again, if anyone who's got kids can attest to this. Like the problem is we imagine the word evil to mean everyone is as evil as you can get. No, you're just, everyone is selfish. Everyone is me focused. Again, I think let's use two words. I'm going to redefine two words here just for the point of this conversation. Sin and evil. I think sin is within yourself, right? You're going to hurt yourself or destroy your own life. But evil is when you actively are trying to advocate for other people to sin, right? So let's use those two words. But everyone is born with a carnal nature to be their own God is basically the way it's sort of defined, right? We're born with that innate nature. And I think the problem is, and going back to the entire idea was words. Let's use those words. If your language is entirely predicated on the idea that if all your language is the idea that you're the victim in this, that you have no power to control yourself, that you have no authority to change your direction, and that your desires, then all of your desires are good, right? It's natural or whatever. Wow, did I just become the nanny? The show with Frandish, your desires. Anyway, if you have that kind of language, then you're never going to be able to escape it, right? Because again, this is the power. The power of language is it determines your reality. If you realize, hold on, I am sinful. My innate desires, my first glance reaction is not always right. I need to judge it against something that's objectively right and beneficial. I need to have a structure that tells me what's good and what's evil. If you change that, then and you realize that you can change your behavior to match that, and that you're powerful enough to change your station in life, if that's your language, then you're going to be able to achieve it. Now, some will achieve it greater in lesser degrees because we all have different strengths, different powers, different skills. And some of us just, unfortunately, you're born with a bad deck of cards. I'm sorry, right? There's nothing we can do to control that. But you can still change the outcome to some degree or another, right? Changing your life doesn't mean that you become Bill Gates. It just may mean that you end up in a better place than you would have been had you not changed your life, right? I've lost a lot. I've been to a lot of funerals. Okay, I'm just going to be honest here. I've been to a lot of funerals. I've had friends who I tried to help them out. A good friend of mine, she was a brilliant artist. I think I've talked about her before. She was a brilliant artist, but she just got off into drugs, completely destroyed her life. She would literally get lost. Like, we'd take her to the church. She would get lost going to the bathroom of the church. This church was literally one long hallway that made a circle. You couldn't possibly, like, it's impossible to get lost. But she could, because it literally had fried her brain that badly. I've known, and my father actually was sort of the first one he served in Vietnam. He knew a lot of guys who came back, and because of their wounds, they got addicted to opioids, and it destroyed them, right? And he would tell me all the time, he's like, you'd be talking to him, and you just realize that whoever that person that he knew was gone. And I've talked to a lot of people like that, where you just realize the person that you once knew was just gone, right? So, I mean, there is bad, does not necessarily always mean hurting somebody and being in jail. Sometimes it means you've just destroyed who you are as a human being. So I think as long as you don't I think everyone has the power to not end up there, no matter where you are in life. You do have the ability to not end up there. Now, again, I'm not saying you're going to be wealthy and famous, and no, that's all crap. But you can change your life at any point. As long as you have the ability to make that choice, you can make that choice.
Yeah. You don't need money to be rich, do you? You don't need money to be rich. I just want to go back to this comment before it goes. Heavenbound daughter, hi. Children can be quite cruel. But is that because of what they've learned from their environment? Because I actually agree with Deanna. It all begins at home. I don't know if for me it is about Jesus or religion or whatever. I think it's your environment that brings that out. Because if you go back to saying who are we? Who is a kid? What does a kid know? How can a kid know itself? It doesn't know itself. It has to pick up on what is going on around them.
Yes and no. Yes and no. So let me, again, this is one of those things where it does take a little more dividing here. Every child has an inborn innate personality, right? That's just, there's nothing you can do about that. However, if we're talking about we're talking about bigger things like, where are you going in your life? How, do you go this way or that way? Does it all begin in the home? Yes, but it requires a home life that's going to train you to be good. Because the problem is, if you don't train them to be good, if you don't train your children if you don't give them a nurturing household, if you don't give them those things, then what they're going to default to is the base programming, right? It's the programming that exists if they were just to be dropped off with wolves in the jungle, right? That's their base programming. We have to take someone who would exist in that world, and we have to give them a world. We have to show them that there's a world, train them in the proper language to become fully functional human beings. That's the role and responsibility of the parents. Believe me, no one's more about that than I am. I mean, we've made tons of sacrifices so we can homeschool our children, so we can give them that start, right, to make certain they actually learned the proper things. So again, I completely agree that the problem, again, one of these key problems is we have a lot of people having kids who have no business having kids. But it's not necessarily because they have trained them to be evil, it's they haven't trained them to be good.
Yeah.
They haven't shown them that. But here's the other side to that. Now again, the problem is for every 10 or 10,000 or 100,000 kids who grow up in bad homes that go on to a bad life, I can show you plenty of other kids who start off in bad homes with bad parents who did change and grow up and became amazing human beings who did a lot to make the world a better place. So does it begin at home? Yes, but it's not the only place, and that's not the only factor here. No. But I do think but I think at the core, though, I think those people who grew up, who came who had a bad start, who ended in great places, though, if you read their writings, they all talk about, again, they don't use the language of victimology. right? Their language is of the victor. Their language is of, I can make the choice. I wasn't going to let this happen to me again. I wasn't going to let this evil occur in someone else's life, right? They have very proactive language, which means their brains, for whatever reason, maybe they was inborn, maybe they learned it, but they learned they could make that decision to change their lives. And they did. So again, it goes back to, we have, hold on.
I was saying, I put the red. I'm sorry, I have violence in school. No, I didn't mean violence starts at home. I don't know if you came in a bit late, but we were talking about how, evil is in kids. You're born with it, and you're either going to start acting up unless you're trained or guided by your parents to be good rather than evil. Not that it starts at home. Sorry if you miss.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is too broad a conversation.
The fly is doing my head in. There's a fly there again. I have to ignore it.
Fly or is it a fairy?
It's a fly.
Okay, you're like, no, this is a fly.
It's an orb.
It's an orb. It's a dark orb. It's an orb of evil. That being said, again, but really this goes back to the language and the power of language to change someone's life, right? That's really where this whole conversation started, which is the power of words, right? Again, this goes back to the question is, we have the power of words have power. They have meaning. And do we not use them with that proper understanding? I would say to that question is yes. I think we have to consciously change the language we use within our own lives as well as cultural.
Sorry, I've just saw this. It's I'm upstairs and this is the street behind me, and someone's got a van with the hazard lights on. That's what that is. Just I can't do anything about it. It's not happening on in my room. I'm sorry to do that. I just now, I thought, what do you mean blinking? It was like, oh my god, I can see that now. Yeah, sorry, I've cut you off there when you were. Oh
no, you're fine. No,
yeah,
no, I think it goes back again. Just even kicking out the supernatural aspect of it, words have power, right? And I think that's really sort of the bigger thing here is on a societal level, things like manners matter because it does, because wherever you draw that line of what's mannerly, what's impolite, what's polite, those lines help to sort of hedge in evil, right? Because people on a societal level will sort of adhere to that. But in our own lives, the way we use language can often determine whether we become successful in life or if we suffer the slings and arrows. And a lot of that language change because what happens is it changes how we view ourselves, right? I'm sorry, but everyone I've ever met who just allowed their lives to go off the rails, they were always the victim. It was always that they were, and that doesn't mean that bad things hadn't happened to them. Of course, some of these people really did have things, but their mentality was of the victim. I've met plenty of people who have absolutely had some really terrible things happen to them, but they had a victor mentality, and no matter how bad things hit them, no matter how bad life was, they were able to become very successful. Again, successful not meaning that they had a lot of money, but that they were
I understand
in their own lives.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no. I know people can turn things around, and we do come from different places in how we feel. Life treats us and how we deal with things. Denied.
Sorry. It's the comment above the permission, fly permission to buzz the tower.
Oh right, yeah. Sorry, that's really annoying me tonight. Yeah. Sorry, where are we at?
I don't even know anymore. It's the power of words. It's the power of words.
It's the power of words and how we, react, whether we take them on or we don't, and. It is, complex, isn't it? Life and how we, get through it and develop and learn just as we're going all the time. Some of us don't, some of us do. But yeah, I don't know where where it starts to get better. I know you're saying you know your way, but you know, from where I am, I've seen this, you know, the same. I don't want to put anyone in any category, but there are you know, people living less quality lives. The you know, because of, you know, money or whatever. But it kind of feels like they're living in it because they're in that box. They're in that box, and they don't choose to break it. Like you say, you can break out of that. Whether you're living on the street, you can still go and be polite and you know, pleasant, and be a good person. It doesn't matter. But sometimes there was a comment before. I think it's already gone now. Cashew. I think it's probably gone, but she said that she'd gone to yeah. I went to an all-day business meeting once. Lunch was brought in, a meat and cheese sandwich. Everyone going to eat it with a knife and fork. Peer pressure got to me. I did it too.
No, that's wonderful, because that
it is.
Yeah, because it goes back to sort of what I was saying earlier about, you know, why on a societal level, right? Why do manners matter? Because we're sheep, right? You know, again, there are people who are born wolves. That's their innate personality. But most of us, we're sheep. We're pack animals. We want to comply. We want the world to like us. So the reason for having high moral standards, or for a culture, from a cultural perspective, is that people will rise up to them. The problem is, the more you lower the standard, the more the people who maybe, like, if they're always going to stay 10 deviation standards below the norm, then the higher the norm is, the higher they go. And that's important, and because it prevents evil. The problem is, again, too many facets to describe, but there's personal and public evil, right? The thing is, we've tried to make the personal the public. We've forgotten that no, those are two very different things. The way I should treat the public writ large and the way I should treat my family are two different things, because they are two different requirements. Public is when we have people of different faiths and ideologies and all these differences can come together and live in harmony, right? That's why we want a high standard of manners, so that we can all behave, right? So we can all treat each other with respect, and that makes society a better place. But then we also have to treat the individual, you know, our individual evil, and be nice to one another on a personal level as well, because that's where it starts. Because again, that's, you know, particularly with children, the best, you know, there's always going to be kids, no matter what you do, they're going to turn out bad, right? Unfortunately, that's because that child at some point makes that choice. But odds are, if you have people who are engaged with them,
if you train him to eat a sandwich with a knife and fork,
exactly,
they'll be beautiful people.
Exactly. Only monsters eat a sandwich with their hands. I think that's really what we need to come away from this. If you're eating a sandwich with a hand, you are a monster.
Yeah, bad.
Terrible human being.
Bad person.
Terrible human being.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. You know, what else do you eat a sandwich with? I don't know. You know, use my silver spoon. You know.
Exactly. Okay, so funny thing. My best friend, he eats pizza with a fork and knife, and like, I'm not talking about like the really super deep dish, like the Chicago style deep dish pizza, which is just a religious experience. I'm talking about like the New York style. Like New York style, you're supposed to hold it in your hand, you fold it a little bit, and you eat it that way. That's how God intended you to eat that pizza. But he's eating it with a fork and knife. I'm just looking like, there's something really wrong with you. Like, you are broken on a deep-seated emotional level, sir. And he's like, and he's just sitting there eating his pizza, and I'm like, no.
But it's a little bit different over here. I mean, my dad had a restaurant. You know, dad's Sicilian. It's pizza pasta, and over in a restaurant, you'd eat with because we don't do huge pizzas over here, really, not like Domino's and that. But people would eat with a knife and fork, and I never. I mean, obviously, but. I saw someone once slicing an olive up, and I thought, why? Like, they took a slice of like down the side of an olive. You know, it was only like that big. It's like, why are you doing that? Just put it in your mouth. It's strange, yeah, what people do. But yeah, that was That was like, that's weird. But Gail's in. Hello, Gail. Children cannot be born bad. Well, no, her son was an absolute dream child. He was the sweetest little boy. Honestly, he could do no wrong. He's never done any wrong, I don't think, has he, Gail, since then? But look, we're up to our hour. And
We are.
have we sort of decided what words we can use in future? What bad words we can use or not? Oh, we haven't really, have we?
No, we haven't. But you know what? Actually, hold on. I think we have. Beyond the mundanity of curse words, what we've learned is that words are powerful things.
Yes.
Positive words, proactive words change your life for the better because they change your perspective on yourself. Negative words, passive words, they put you into a bad position because it changes your mind, and now your mind believes that you can't achieve great things. And if there's anything I can say to end this, I would like to just say to everyone who's watching, whether live or recorded, you are a powerful being. You have the ability to change your life for the good. You can. There's nothing. The only thing that will stop you is yourself.
That's very true.
So take that and run with it, and always eat your pizza with a hand, not with a fork and knife like the monsters do.
Exactly. And, also don't forget, this jar does need filling now and again. So if people do want to let loose, that's okay.
So if you want to tell if you want to tell us off, just make certain you're willing to feed the kitties. All I'm saying. I'll let you yell at me all day. Put the money in the swear jar. That's all I'm saying.
That's fair enough. That's a good deal. Well, look, everyone, we're up to our hour. Thank you, Jason. It's been interesting. I'm going to think twice about the words I use next time I'm in one of those situations where I probably won't actually, but
don't lie. You're gonna be like, no, that mother.
Exactly. Wait till we end broadcast. I'm going to give it. I'll tell you exactly what I think. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to all the mods. You've done a great job tonight. Thanks, Diana, if you're still in here, for that super chat. That was very generous of you. I'll see you all in the week. Until then, bye-bye.